I found out that my wife is cheating on me, but she and Josh don't know that I know it. Josh, by the way, is, or was, my best friend. I know, it's a cliché. But clichés become clichés because they happen so often. I had no idea how to deal with this. The thing is, I couldn't understand why he had my wife. Don't get me wrong, my wife is definitely a beauty. She's in her 30s, and even after 2 kids, she looks damn sexy in a bikini, but his wife Carla is just as hot, if not hotter. Carla is quite tall, standing at 5 feet 7 inches, with red hair that hangs down to the middle of her back, and green eyes that seem to be able to see deep into the soul. I found out that her measurements were 36, 23, 34, and I won't deny that she turned me on. After I found out about Josh and Heather, I did nothing for several weeks, trying to decide what to do. I loved Heather and wondered if there was any way to save our marriage. It seemed unlikely, but I couldn't know for sure until we talked. On Friday, I decided to meet with her, but had to postpone it until Monday. Why wait 2 days? My wife received a call from a very sick friend who needed help, and she rushed to help. I had no doubt that if I called Josh and asked if he wanted to play golf on Saturday, Carla would come up and tell me that Josh was not at home and had gone somewhere for the weekend. My parents had taken the kids to their lake house, so being away from my wife and kids meant I was going to have a quiet weekend alone, and it might very well be the last quiet weekend I'll ever have. On the way home, I stopped, bought a case of beer, and firmly decided that by Sunday evening, all 24 bottles would be empty. When I got home, I put on shorts and a t-shirt and went to the kitchen. Dinner this evening will be simple. I opened a package of hot dogs and put them in a pot to boil, chopped an onion, and took a can of baked beans out of the pantry. I poured the beans into the pan, put it on the stove, and opened a second can of beer. I was rummaging through the refrigerator for mustard when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Carla standing there. She was wearing a tank top but didn't seem to have a bra. She had slippers on her feet. The nipples pressed hard on the t-shirt, and I instantly became more aroused. "Are you busy?" "Partially. I cook dinner and drink beer." "Do you mind if I join?" "Not in the least." "I could use some company," I said, stepping aside and letting her in. We went into the kitchen, and she sat down at the table. I knew she didn't drink beer, so I opened a bottle of Merlot and poured her a glass. "Dinner is nothing special," I said. "Hot dogs and baked beans. Quite a simple thing. Fits. The hot dogs were boiling and the beans were bubbling, so I turned off the heat, moved the pans to the cool side of the stove, and took 2 platees from the cupboard. I handed one to Carla. She cooked herself 2 hot dogs and put some beans on her plate. We sat down to eat, and I asked, "What brought you here? Do you know where Heather is?" "She went to help a sick friend." "I wonder when this happened." "When did that happen?" "This is Josh's disease. He looked damn healthy when he left the house. You know Josh and Heather are cheating on us, right? And that they are now in room 130 at Arrowhead Lodge?" "I didn't know where they were, but I've known for a couple of weeks that she's cheating on me." "How did you know?" "I found a condom wrapper in his pants pocket when I was doing laundry. We are trying to get pregnant and don't use condoms. But since he cheats, I decided not to give birth to his child. I don't want to be a single mother if I get divorced, so I used part of my father's inheritance to hire a private investigator. They get together for long lunches, and when he calls and tells me he's working late, he's usually working on Heather. How do you know?" "I was in the basement working on a bookcase that I'm making now." The phone rang and I picked up the phone in the basement. Heather must have picked up the phone on the second floor a second before me, and I heard her say the word "lover" just as I put the phone to my ear, so I listened calmly as Josh told her that they would have to miss his usual long lunch at the Marriott because he has an important meeting. I had to listen to her say that she would miss her and that he would have to work hard to make amends next time. "And you didn't do anything?" "I just can't decide what to do. Now, I have decided to meet her when she gets home and see what happens next." "Well, what are you going to do?" "You'll understand in a few minutes." I looked at her in confusion. "What do I understand?" She stood up, came over, and sat on my lap. I see the way you look at me, and I know damn well that if we weren't married, you'd be after me. We may both still be married, but we are no longer obligated to be faithful to Josh and Heather. They have freed us from that obligation. She hugged me and, having reached my manhood, began to excite me. I moved to get more comfortable. I looked at her in amazement. She leaned down, and her lips met mine. Carla broke the kiss and said, "I'm going to take revenge to the end." Even though we decided to have a baby, I managed to come up with excuses not to have sex during my fertile period, just in case I went to the doctor and got a diaphragm. How bad do you want revenge on Josh? Why do you ask? I intend to take full revenge. I am currently in my most fertile state and my diaphragm is in my purse. This means... That's exactly what it means. Carla was right. It would be full-fledged revenge if Josh raised my child thinking it was his child. I smiled. While caressing Carla, I discovered that she was not wearing underwear. She moaned and whispered, "Oh yes." I broke the kiss and said, "On Heather's side of the bed. That's where I want you. On Heather's side of the bed." She got up from my lap and said, "Come on." We both hurriedly undressed when we got to the bedroom. Carla naked was stunning, and she had something I'd never seen before except in men's magazines. She was completely shaved. I already mentioned that Heather was a beauty, but why Josh would fuck my wife when he had a woman like Carla was completely beyond me. Carla seemed to be thinking along the same lines. She looked at my naked body with puzzlement, and when I asked her what she was thinking about, she replied, "I just do not understand. Your manly tool is vastly superior to Josh's, so why does Heather want to fuck my husband when she has you and this tool at home and ready to go? I don't think this makes any sense." Doesn't matter. You are here now, and others do not exist now. You are absolutely right. Take me to bed, and take me. I pointed to Heather's side. Carla smiled and said, "You take me on Heather's side, and then we'll go to me, and I'll take you on Josh's side." Agreed. She lay down on the bed and demanded hard sex. I did what the lady asked. She moaned as we followed each other like two animals in the heat. She begged me not to stop and to continue forever. Her words drove me crazy, and I wanted to do everything for her. The two of us reached the peak, and it was enchanting. We both started sweating, and I fell on the bed next to her. Carla propped herself up on her elbow and looked down at me. I cannot believe this. I just can't believe it. Heather may be having it, but she wants my husband. You and I have the rest of the evening, all of tomorrow and part of Sunday, and when we're done, you won't care if Heather comes home. Having rested a little, we played the second round and it was no worse than the first. Carla asked, "You won't send me home, will you?" "Stupid girl," I said, pulling her towards me. We fell asleep hugging each other. This morning I woke up before Carla and, looking at her, I couldn't help but think that my betrayal with Josh's wife had lowered me to the same level as Heather. Of course, this can be attributed to Heather's betrayal, which freed me from my vows. What she did, I can do too, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? But for me, the main thing was that I cheated on my marriage. I couldn't pretend to be moral in my conflict with Heather. True, she didn't know that I had cheated, but I knew it. I didn't notice that Carla was awake until she said, "You look thoughtful. What are you thinking about?" I told her. She replied, "I made the same promises you made when I married Josh. So I guess that makes me a liar too, but I don't think so. Josh made the same vows I did, and then broke them. To me, this means that we had a contract, and if we were doing law, if I remember correctly from my business law classes, Josh was in breach of the contract, and the contract could be declared void. I know marriages aren't treated that way, but that doesn't change the fact that Josh and I had a contract, and he broke it with me, which means, at least for me, that I'm no longer obligated to honor it. You should look at your marriage the same way. You don't deceive your beloved. You only do what her breach of contract allows you to do. Enough about this. Feed me, and then we should go to my place and reconsecrate the side of the bed where Josh slept and work on getting me pregnant. She started to excite me, and then we took off. If she wasn't pregnant by the time we fell asleep at her house, it wasn't because we didn't try hard enough. In the morning, she asked when the children would be home, and I replied that it would be around 6. She fed me steak and eggs for breakfast, telling me that I would need energy if I was going to do anything nice for her that day. We parted ways around 4, so I could head home and be there in case my parents arrived earlier than expected. Before I returned home, Carla asked me if I had made my decision, and I admitted that I had not. Are you a good enough actor to pretend that everything is fine? I don't know. Why is this necessary? Because, in my opinion, the best revenge is to continue doing what we did over the weekend. I want to continue until I get pregnant. Besides, you have to think about your children. Divorce will tear you away from them because here, the courts always give custody to the mother. You might be able to see them every weekend, but that would only be if Heather wasn't too mad at you to find some reason for you not being able to see them. My advice is to put up with this bitch. Live as usual, except that you and I will have wild sex every chance we get. I doubt it, Carla. Sooner or later, the traitors will be caught. If they catch us, it will reduce our chances of maintaining a high level in any conflicts. We caught them because of stupid mistakes. You found out about Heather because they were both stupid enough to use home phones to communicate. I found out about this because Josh was so sloppy that he brought the evidence home in his pants pocket. We will not give this kind of chance. We'll buy a couple of track phones at Walmart and use them to keep in touch, and to keep our spouses from accidentally finding them, we'll leave them on our desks. We will always know when they meet, and we will get together at the same time. No, we can't do that. If Heather calls and says she has to work late, I'll have to babysit, and if they do it at lunchtime, we won't be able to either because I can rarely take a long lunch. You sometimes work late, don't you? When you do this, she will have to be home to look after the children. I play cards with a few girlfriends from college every Wednesday night, and I sometimes stop for drinks after work with the people I work with, and Josh is used to it. Another thing we can do is tap into our phone lines so we know what they are talking about. Are you in game? You've thought of everything, haven't you? Maybe I missed something, but if we both work together, I think we can cover all sides. Are you sure you want this? I'm absolutely sure. As I told you at the very beginning, I want to get back at Josh. I gave him everything I have, and he stabbed me in the back. I spoil this son of a bitch to death, and he cheats on me. There's no way in hell I'm going to let it slide. My idea of perfect revenge is to let him raise another man's child. And what could be sweeter than having that child's father, the husband of the woman he's cheating with, in his bed? I also want revenge. I think I can take revenge after seeing how this asshole raises my child, but I'm not sure that I can pretend to be a loving husband for a wife who cheats on me. You will be stimulated by your mistress, right? Over the last 48 hours, you seem to have really enjoyed what I gave you. You can have as much sex as you want, at any time and for as long as you want me. You know that such an offer is damn hard to refuse. I certainly hope so, and that's not all. Josh wants 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and I want them both to have the same dad. What if the first child is a girl? I know he will want a son. Are you ready to keep trying? Yes, until we get caught. We just have to make sure that doesn't happen. Yes, and one last thing. Can you act naturally around Josh? It will be hard not to grin knowing that I will try my best to give him a child to raise, but I think I can handle it. I think I'll stay after work with the girls on Tuesday. What a coincidence. On Tuesday I will work late. My parents dropped the kids off at 6:30 and said they hadn't eaten yet, so I took them to Mickey's and wasn't surprised when they said they wanted a Happy Meal. After we ate and came home, Heather asked where we were and said sharply, "Why didn't you call me and ask if I wanted to have dinner with you? You didn't tell me when you'd be back. You didn't call me on my cell phone and didn't say that you were back," I answered just as sharply. She gave me an angry look and went to greet the children. While Heather put the kids to bed, I started looking into it. I learned how to tap a phone line using a voice recorder and decided to buy 1 or 2 on the way home from work the next day. I would buy 2 to bet not only on my line, but also on Josh's line. I'll have to call Carla and make an arrangement. I noticed that Heather didn't shower before bed. She may have showered before returning home, but then again, perhaps she didn't. When Heather went to bed, I cited an upset stomach and told her that maybe we could have sex the next day. On Monday at 3:20, my secretary told me that Mrs. Carla Marvis wanted to see me, and I asked Shelley to let Carla in. Carla came in, closed the door behind her, came up to me and kissed me. "It's a pity that your secretary is sitting outside your door. If she weren't there, I would have locked the door and you could have had me right here on your desk. If you can wait 10 minutes, she'll go home at 3:30. Wow, I was just kidding, but I can easily kill 10 minutes. She opened her purse, took out her cell phone, handed it to me and said that she had already written down her number in it. The plan for tomorrow is this. At lunchtime, I'll run to the Marriott and rent a room. I chose the Marriott because to get to the rooms, you have to go inside and walk down a hallway. No outside doors, so anyone could see us coming in. I'll call you and give you the room number. I'll finish work at 4:30 and go straight to my room. When you get there, go to a bar and have a drink. And if anyone there recognizes and sees you, they will think that you just stopped for a drink on the way home. After drinking, you come to the room where I will wait for you. So how?" "Sounds like a great plan. On the way home, I'll pick up what we need to tap our phones. When will it be convenient for me to come and do this?" "It's already been done. I went online and found out how to do it, and there is a voice recorder I can use." At that moment, Shelley stuck her head through the door and said, "I'm leaving. See you in the morning." When the door closed, Carla stood up to lock the door. It was quick, no-frills sex, and we both reached our peak. She said, "This will keep me going until tomorrow, but you better come back prepared for a long and energetic evening. Maybe you should take some vitamins." On the way home, I stopped at a radio station and bought 2 tape recorders and 6 extra cassettes. I took a second tape recorder to listen to recordings in my office. I will save the tapes, which contain something of the two lovers, until the day I tell the judge the reasons for the divorce. When I returned home, Heather had already prepared dinner and brought wine, which was a good sign that she was in a loving mood, and I was surprised by this. She spent the weekend having sex with her lover, and now she comes home wanting more, transformed. Was she a nymphomaniac? Or was she simply enjoying her ignorant, as it seemed to her, husband after being with her lover? Maybe someday I will find the answer to this question. Sex with Heather was always good, and she loved doing it all. If Carla was being honest, and not just playing to my ego when she said I was bigger than Josh, I have to wonder what he had that Heather thought I lacked. Another question that I may someday get an answer to. When dinner was over, and the kids were parked in front of the electronic nanny, Heather said, "You know you have work tonight, right?" "About? And why is this?" "You need to make up for what you missed last night." "I will do everything in my power. You are always amazing, my love." I wanted to say, "Then why are you cheating on me with Josh?" but remained silent. While Heather read to the children, I went down to the basement, found where the phone line was, went into it, and connected the recording. Heather doesn't leave for work until an hour after I do, and I think that's when she and Josh will talk. I could be wrong about this. Heather had a cell phone, and of course they could talk on her work phone while she was at work. I was betting that the call I overheard was a sign that they were talking while she was home. We did it 3 times that night, which was a rare occurrence for us. We had sex 3 or 4 times a week, but usually only peaked once, although sometimes twice. Here's another thing to think about. The warning bell rang just after we finished our 3rd time. We were lying next to each other when Heather said, "Have you thought about the fact that we could have another child?" "Not real," I said, wondering if this had something to do with Josh. "I'm actually toying with the idea of getting a vasectomy so you can get off the pill and we'll still be safe." "Why don't you want more?" "We gave birth to Mike and Anna so soon after the wedding that we didn't have the opportunity to go somewhere and see anything. Now we are still young enough for this when Mike and Anna become independent. Young children will rule this out. Besides, right now we need the income from your work. We will be hurt by your leaving work due to pregnancy." I had very bad thoughts running through my head. I'm sure Heather knew that Carla and Josh had decided to try for a baby. Did Heather want to get Josh's first child before Carla got him? Was there something Heather had against Carla? Or was it just Heather trying to lay claim to her lover? Either way, it made me think that I couldn't carry out Carla's plan. I think I'm going to have to leave Heather pretty damn soon. And then a very, very bad thought came into my head. Were Mike and Anna even mine? I had to find out. I fell into a very restless sleep. The next day, after a grueling session in room 202 of the Marriott Hotel, I expressed my concerns to Carla. "I can't even imagine what you should do," said Carla. "Should I talk to her about Josh now, before she gets pregnant? Of course, she may already be pregnant and getting ready to throw the baby at you. I know what I would do, but I'm not a man, and I'm not you. What would you do?" "I would just tell her that I don't want any more children, and just in case I would wear a condom until I get a vasectomy. If she does get pregnant, that's when I'll have a confrontation. I'd say we probably need a DNA test to find out if it was mine or Josh's. This should make her thrash around. If I get a vasectomy, it will ruin our revenge plan. Just don't do this until I'm pregnant. It will be a failure because I want all my children to have the same father. Maybe we'll get lucky. Maybe Heather was just feeling you out. You said you didn't want to, and that would make her say no. We'll just never know until she comes up to you and tells you the rabbit died." She looked at her watch and said, "We have a couple more chances for you to make me a mother." I stopped on the way home and bought a bunch of condoms, and that night when Heather wanted sex, I pulled out one of the condoms and started putting it on. Why else is this? I decided to use them until I get a vasectomy. I really don't want any more children. Well, take it off. I hate this feeling. I'll stay on the pill and use spermicide until I can adjust to the diaphragm. This way, we will be completely safe. You hate feeling them, I thought as I finished rolling it. Heather was a virgin when we got married, and I never used a rubber band with her. When did she realize she didn't like feeling them? And with whom? Whatever it was, it only strengthened my decision to find out about the paternity of my two children. Then I remembered that it was because Josh used rubber bands when he slept with Heather that Carla realized that Josh was cheating on her. I was still planning on getting tested. If you don't already have spermicide, I'll use the condoms I bought today. I don't have it, but I'll buy it tomorrow and make an appointment with the doctor about the diaphragm. I don't want you to have a vasectomy. I want to keep this option open in case you ever change your mind. I left the rubber band and climbed onto the bed. We had sex. After we finished it, I went to the bathroom. When I returned to the bed, Heather was lying on her side, sleeping. It was time to go down to the basement and check the tape recorder. A couple of unimportant calls and then, "Hello? Good morning, honey. Do you miss me? Of course you know. Shall we have lunch today? Yes, but I think our lunch meetings will end soon if we don't find somewhere cheaper. These motel rooms are killing my family budget. I can't keep pulling out of it. Sooner or later I won't have enough money to feed my family, and I will understand why. I'll try to think of something. On Wednesday evening, this one," and here he used obscene language, referring to Carla, "had a card party. Have you already figured out how to get out of the house?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it. I'll cross my fingers. I need more from you than I get in a 45-minute lunch break." "Me too, my love. We'll talk tomorrow?" "Certainly. Bye." "Bye, baby." I almost puked when I realized I was with Heather after she let Josh use her this afternoon, but I managed to hold on. I found it interesting that my unfaithful wife not only cheated on me, but also paid for the room. Yes. And how will Carla react when she hears her husband call her? The only thing I knew for sure as I walked up the basement steps was that Heather wouldn't be able to leave the house on Wednesday night. On Tuesday, when I got to work, I took my phone out of my desk drawer and called Carla, and when she answered, I said, "Good morning." "Listen," I said, holding the recorder up to the phone and pressing the play button. After listening to the recording and hearing curses addressed to her, she said, "When the time comes, I will kill this bastard." "Yeah, about Wednesday. What are you going to do?" "I think I'll have to work late on Wednesday, but I won't let her know until it's time to finish work. She doesn't have enough time to call a nanny. Did you hear that Heather pays for the room? This doesn't surprise me. Josh has always been cheap. I think if you're going to work late, I'll skip my card night and we can meet. I'll call you tomorrow and arrange everything. At breakfast on Wednesday, Heather asked me if I had plans for the evening. I said no and asked what was wrong. The girls from work were talking about having a couple of drinks after work and chatting. I can't do this if you don't look after the kids. It's not a problem. I kissed her and went to work. I went to the Marriott, rented a room, and when I got to work, I called Carla. Heather finishes work at 5, so I called her at 4:40 and told her I would be late at work. There are some issues with Henderson's contract that need to be resolved before Nathan goes to meet them tomorrow morning. Sorry for the late warning, but I really can't leave now. So don't wait for me. Love you. Bye. Pleasantly tired, I returned home by nightfall. It's a good thing Heather was already asleep, because if she had gotten up and wanted to play, I'm not sure I would have been able to handle it. For the next 5 weeks, Carla and I met on average twice a week, and we always knew in advance what Josh and Heather were doing. It was during this 5th week that Carla said, "Congratulations, Dad. How about having sex with the mother of your child?" How does Josh feel about this? He doesn't know yet. First, I needed to tell the baby's father. Now I can tell Josh. You know, I said, the only thing we didn't do was go on a weekend trip together. I think we owe it to ourselves to celebrate pregnancy just once. We just need to do it without the two of them putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with the correct answer. It's funny that you brought this up today. Josh must fly to San Diego to settle some matters with his father's estate. He's going to see some relatives this weekend before going to see his lawyer on Monday. If you can figure out how to get away for the weekend, we can go somewhere without anyone having to think about it. I think I can handle it. I took my cell phone and called my brother who lived in Akron. I asked him to call me at my house right after I left for work in the morning and tell Heather that I needed to come see him on a family matter over the weekend. I told him I would call later and explain what was happening. He said he would take care of it, and we said goodbye. I turned to Carla and said, "All we have left is to decide where we want to go." The next morning, Heather called me on my cell phone about 5 minutes after I left the house. "You need to call Bill as soon as possible. He has an urgent family matter and needs to talk to you." "I will call you." I waited until I got to work and called Bill. I told her that Brian, his son, needed a kidney transplant, and I needed to know if you would agree to donate a kidney, and if so, if you would come to check the compatibility. "So what's up?" I explained the situation to him, and he told me that I could count on his help anytime I needed it. I knew I could count on him because he hated cheating wives. He was a single father because his wife cheated on him. He kicked her out and stayed with the children when Martha died in a car accident. I called Carla, told her how everything worked out, and we agreed to go away for the weekend. I called Arrowhead Lodge and was even able to book room 130. Very fitting, I thought. At 2 o'clock, I called Heather and told her I was flying to Akron. "I'll go home and pack my things. My flight leaves at 8 and I need to be at least half an hour early to check in. I don't want to seem selfish, but I hope your kidney doesn't work. I need you to have all your parts so that we can go all the way to old age together." Damn it, Heather. The way you say it makes me think you really love me. You better not have any doubts about this, Bob. Not a bit. If only you knew, I thought, saying goodbye and hanging up. When I got home, Heather was waiting for me in what she called her fuck me costume, naked, wearing come fuck me pumps. "Do you have time to charge me while you're away?" Since I really didn't need to rush to catch a non-existent flight, I said I had time. After sex, Heather lay on the bed, and when I got dressed, she said, "On the phone you spoke as if you doubted that I loved you." "Just kidding, baby. I know very well how much you love me." "Yes, of course, you can see it every time you cheat on me with Josh," I thought. "I don't want you to ever doubt that love." Never. The weekend with Carla was grueling. We make love and go to bed. We wake up in the morning, make love, and then go to breakfast. We return to the room and make love until lunch. We'll eat, and then we'll go back to the room and make love. We go out to sit by the pool for a while, and then come back and make love. Let's go out to dinner, have a few drinks and dance, and then make love again. Repeat the next day, and then again on Monday morning. We promised each other we would do it again, and then headed home. When I got home, Heather was at work, so I went down to the basement and checked the tape recorder. First, Bill called on Friday morning. A couple of minutes after she hung up, Josh called her. "Have you figured out how to free yourself for the weekend? I would love to spend a couple of days with you without interruption." "No, Josh. I couldn't come up with anything, and the truth is that I don't want to come up with anything." "What's the matter?" "Why?" "You know, I felt guilty for what I was doing. I love Bob, and he deserves better than to have a cheating wife. I was going to tell you it's over. I need to devote myself to Bob." "Come on, Heather, you've been making love to me for almost a year now. How could you do this if you love him as much as you say?" "First of all, I need to correct you. I've never made love to you. I had sex with you, but I never made love to you. The only man I make love to is Bob." "Bullshit!" "No, Josh, it's not bullshit. I love this man and try to show him that I love him every chance I get. If you love him so much, then why are you sleeping with me?" Excitement about it. The thrill of doing something illegal and forbidden. It was a big thrill for me to go home and make love to Bob after I fucked you. It gave me some huge releases. Giving him a few wet seconds turned you on? If so, why not continue? I never gave him wet seconds. I was always pure when I made love to him. Bullshit, Heather. You've never showered before leaving a motel. I keep a travel bag at work, and it contains everything I need for a shower. Bob never even came close to feeling the slightest trace of you. No, Josh, I'll end this before we get caught. I love Bob and don't want to lose him. Just be glad you got me drunk the first time. Maybe so, but you weren't drunk all the other times. It all depends on what you mean by drunk. I was drunk with the excitement of making love to Bob after you fucked me. I wanted to see if there would be a thrill and excitement if I did it sober, so I let you do it a second time, and that was the only reason I kept doing it. We got away with it for a little over a year, but I just realized that the feeling I have for Bob after being with you is not worth what it will cost me if we get caught and I lose Bob. Have fun in California, Josh, and when you get home, don't call me. Bye. Interesting, I thought, taking out the film and inserting a new one. I unpacked my things and went to work. Around 11, I called Carla, and when I said hi, she said, "I miss you. Is everything okay? You are sexy. Yes, I want you to listen to something. If this is a Friday telephone conversation, then I have already heard it." "What do you think?" "It looks like she started to think with her head and realized that she could lose you." "What are you going to do?" "I've already decided that I'll only stay with her until the kids turn 18, and I don't see anything that would make me change my mind." If she meant what she said to Josh, it would be easier for her to hold on. But the trust was gone. Even if she breaks up with Josh and they never meet again, how do I know that somewhere down the road, she won't start missing the thrill and excitement of cheating and hook up with some new guy? You can always hit her with, "If you're really done with Josh, maybe we can move on, but you won't get a second chance." No, I cannot. This would give away the information that I have a wiretap on my phone, and, as I said, the trust was gone. I need a way to keep track of what she's up to. Besides, she knows me and understands that if I knew, I would share it with you. She could say this to Josh, and it would make him think, and we don't want that. Is this your roundabout way of saying we'll keep going like this? You heard the conversation. They got away with it for a little over a year, but you and I only got away with it for a couple of months. They owe us another 10 or 12 months. And then, of course, there are penalties and interest that could make it even longer. I would like that. Carla and I continued to see each other on average twice a week until her 7th month. She wanted to continue, but her belly was so big that I couldn't make love to her without hurting her. That's right. We need to take care of babies. An ultrasound showed that Carla was having twins. She gave birth to 2 beautiful little girls. As she predicted, Josh wanted a son. So 2 years after the twins were born, she became pregnant again. And this time an ultrasound showed it was a boy. We made love until her 8th month, and then we separated. We both felt like we'd gotten away with it long enough that if we got caught, Carla would be a single mother with 3 kids to raise, and neither of us wanted that. As Carla put it the last time we were together, the goal was to take revenge on the deceiver by giving him other people's children to raise. To do this, I need to stay married to him. Josh got a promotion that required him to move, and I haven't seen or spoken to Carla since they moved, but I think about her often and fondly. It's been 6 years, and as far as I know, at least based on the phone wiretapping, Heather hasn't contacted anyone else. On the other hand, she and Josh had been doing what they were doing for over a year, and I had no idea. She might wise up and stop using her house phone for illicit communications, but I've been keeping a close eye on her and have yet to see anything that would indicate that. She's doing her best to spoil the hell out of me, and I'm critically rethinking my plan to leave her when the kids turn 18. That will be another 4 years for Mike and 5 for Anna. I'll just wait and see. And subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Second story. You see, I love cats, but this long-standing affection of mine does not obscure the fact that each of them has a brain the size of a walnut, and less common sense than a teenager after a couple of beers. Firstly, as a child, I never thought or wanted to have a cat. When I was growing up, our family never had pets, and constantly caring for any kind of them seemed like hard and pointless work to me. But one day, for some reason, my ex-girlfriend decided that we needed a cat, but I wanted to have sex with her, so I agreed. Then we broke up and she moved somewhere that didn't allow pets, and I ended up stuck with this beast. It was a tabby cat that destroyed everything in my house in no time. As much as I wanted to hate him, when he snuggled up to me at night and purred like a warm, fuzzy little motor, well, I couldn't be angry anymore. What a manipulative little asshole he is. Eventually he got sick, and I had to put him down. By that time I realized that I liked these purrs, and got a couple of kittens, a brother, and a sister. This was before I met my current wife. Both cats were completely black. Only the female had blue eyes, and the male had green eyes. In addition, the male was larger, but had a calmer character. Unlike him, my sister was very energetic and cocky. Since they were both pure black, they needed witch names, so I chose Hermione and Hagrid. The names, as they say, matched their personalities. I never considered using the nickname Harry. I'm not going to argue, but I think it's a stupid name for a cat. The same can be said about Ron or Weasley, especially for a cat without red fur. Of course, their real names didn't matter when I growled on both of them, like enough or lie down. Not that they ever responded to my commands or were quick to obey. No, although these fidgets preferred my company, they always remained on their own minds. But, as I said, my wife didn't like cats. She pretended to tolerate them while we were dating and engaged, but after we got married, she tried to get me to get rid of them. I refused, and this dispute became the first big quarrel between us. I eventually prevailed, but her passive-aggressive behavior in the marriage began soon after. I must face the fact that I was probably somewhat responsible for this situation. The thing is, in the middle of our fight, my wife Randy told me that she didn't like cats because, when she was a child, she read a story about some crazy old cat lady who died of a sudden heart attack. The lady was a recluse, and by the time it occurred to anyone to check on the grandmother, 10 of her cats, mad with hunger, attacked the most obvious source of meat in the area. As a result, a panicked fear took root in my wife's soul that one day the same thing might happen to her, when for some reason I was suddenly not at home. This story obviously grew out of the same irrational childhood fears that we all have, and Randy's telling of it reflected her deep trust in me. My subsequent hysterical laughter and condescending comment that her fear was stupid and baseless, in retrospect, did not help overcome her phobia, but only angered Randy. Well, I'm sorry, it probably wasn't one of my most emotionally supportive moments in our married life. In the end, we both apologized. I acknowledged the depth of her fear and assured my wife that I would feed the animals well, so there would be no problem. She expressed the hope that she would learn to live with them. Days, weeks, and months flew by, and I still thought that her fears were sheer nonsense. Over time, it became obvious that Randy had lied about my cats. So, her favorite pastime was to leave the front door ajar and pretend that it happened by accident, in the hope that our black furry samurai would one day run away and never return. That way, she probably thought, the problem would solve itself. You see, I kept cats inside the house because I was convinced they would be killed or maimed outside, given the tiny cat brains the size of walnuts. Randy apparently proved me wrong. In some amazing way, either gods or saints, the righteous ones, looked after Hagrid and Hermione, because after an hour of frantically running around the yard and puzzling climbs and somersaults through the trees along the sides of the house, they became bored, and they returned home to eat and then curl up in a ball or lie down anywhere and sleep without hind legs. Everything changed after I started watching videos on Instagram. I've seen these videos taken from cameras mounted on collars that cats wear. I think you probably watched them too. I thought it was funny and decided to do the same with my blacktails. I usually let my cats go outside whenever I get home from work, right after I put collars with miniature video cameras on them. My little tigers always like to climb trees and hide there for a while. Then they went down and began to chase each other in circles or other intricate trajectories. Both cats were accustomed to this daily routine and, as a result, never went outside, even when my wife deliberately left the doors open. The cat's reflex was this: it's not time for us to go out, because the owner, that is me, is not in the house. And besides, we were not wearing collars with these things. If any of these conditions were not met, Hermione and Hagrid did not show their noses over the threshold, and they were usually only gone for about an hour, and then quickly returned home when I loudly called them back. I could tell that the failure of Randy's cunning plans to accidentally get the cats out of the house was driving my wife crazy every day, but I pretended not to notice. When the cats returned home, I filmed them and took the cameras, which were wireless and connected to my phone, and then downloaded video, edited short videos, and posted them on social networks. I know. It seems like pretty stupid content, but I already had 500,000 subscribers who liked my cat videos, so it all amused the hell out of me. Something about seeing their paws flash in camera shots as they ran, seeing the world around them from a cat's point of view, framed by their furry chins and shaking whiskers, and heard their purring, hissing, meowing, and sometimes musical roulades. Every time it made me laugh, sometimes right to tears. My subscribers, too, were touched and were delighted with these cat videos, judging by their comments and thousands of likes. The company where I purchased the mini cameras for my cats liked the massive advertising of their products and upgraded my gadgets to the newest and most advanced models for free, provided that I use them regularly. The other day, I returned home early from work. It was snowing in our area, with several inches falling by mid-afternoon. Reports of expected increased rainfall were everywhere, and for this reason I was not worried about getting there, because many people didn't bother to go to work at all. What really excited me was that my cats had never seen snow before. The last few winters have been warm and almost snowless. The thought of a video of black beasts frolicking in white snow made me giddy with adrenaline in anticipation of how hilarious the video I could film and post online. Upon arrival, it turned out that for some reason my wife was not at home, which came as a slight surprise to me since her car was in the garage. I knew that her office, like many others, was closed due to bad weather. Randy worked for a government agency, and when I was driving home, I heard a radio announcement announcing the early closure of most government offices in our area. Where could she have gone? Hagrid and Hermione didn't greet me at the door, which was also quite unusual. Having driven the car into the garage, I decided to look for them before trying to find out where my wife was. The reason the cats didn't come to the garage door was because they were sitting side by side, staring out the window, mesmerized by the softly falling flakes of snow behind it. I gave them the signal, one of the few verbal commands they would respond to, and they immediately ran to the front door to put on their camera collars. After equipping the cats with their devices and turning on the recording, I opened the door, and Hermione carefully poked her head outside, sniffing and looking around at the unusual surroundings. The more impatient Hagrid jumped over her because she was too slow and immediately crashed into the all-encompassing white carpet, passing with a surprised "May" a little forward. and leaving behind a darkening trail of 4 cat protectors. Hermione watched the brave trailblazer for a couple of seconds and then shook her head in the feline equivalent of saying, "Ah, screw it all!" and jumped after him. The crazed cats had a full-blown explosion of ecstatic excitement in our front yard. They ran in circles and weaved along unpredictable trajectories with crazy pewter eyes, gliding on spreading paws, funny flopping on their side and jumping up again. They jumped with acceleration into the snowdrifts, realizing that the snow was cold and wet, and then quickly forgot about it during the game. I made myself a cup of coffee and watched them tumble for a while. Watching this circus live, laughing at the cat somersaults, was much better than on TV. After about 15 minutes, the cats apparently got tired of chasing each other, and one after another they climbed up a tree located between our house and the neighbor's house. I knew from experience that they would be there, resting, for some time. By the way, about this. I didn't like our neighbor. First of all, his name was Goose. Strictly speaking, Gus, but that doesn't matter. This Goose was a general contractor who had just renovated his own home. Frankly, after the renovation, his house looked pretty nice, so we talked to him about doing a similar renovation to our house, too. Secondly, our neighbor was a fit and muscular guy, and he always liked to flirt with Randy, who would giggle every time, languidly straighten her hair, stick her chest out, and flirt back. When I confronted her about this, she indignantly denied all my accusations, calling them outrageous insinuations, and at the same time added that I cling to her only because I am not confident in myself. Third, this Goose was also a cyclist fanatic, and a particularly obnoxious type at that, who at every opportunity ranted about his watts, amperage, volts, calories, and his next race, in each of which he intended to take the top prize. He liked to ride his bike along the canal embankment near our house, even in the worst weather, when it was slippery and muddy, because, as he said to my wife's stupidly suggestive giggle, "What's the point of doing something if it doesn't make you dirty?" But I got a little distracted while finishing my cup of coffee. Just then, Randy returned. "Where are the cats?" Without saying hello, the first thing she did was ask a question, and in a somewhat tense tone. It was strange. Randy never asked about them, and now she seemed quite excited. Taking a closer look at my wife, I realized that she looked very disheveled, as if she had to quickly get dressed. Her hair, usually carefully styled, was now in such disarray as if she had just woken up, or she slid out of the hayloft head down. "Outside," I answered, watching her. She behaved suspiciously, insecurely, and her gaze slid, without lingering, on the kitchen items, while trying not to meet mine. She seemed to not know what words to choose and what to say next. Suddenly, like a cat, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end with a premonition of something very bad. "Why?" I asked briefly. She almost jumped and looked shocked, but quickly managed to pull herself together. "What why?" she answered, still avoiding looking at me. "Why are you asking about cats?" She seemed to relax slightly, leaning back and leaning her back against the wall. "Well, I was worried about them in this weather," she said, looking into my eyes for a second, but then quickly looked away. Now I knew she was lying. What she wanted was for them to get stuck in the snow and freeze to death in this weather. "Where have you been?" I rolled an oncoming test ball. She began to look scared again, and her features tensed again. It was as if I could see the wheels in her head spinning madly as Randy frantically tried to figure out what to say to her. She even seemed to shrink a little, standing against the wall and frantically clutching herself with her arms under her chest. "I went to Gus's house to discuss with him the renovations we want to do." She finally gave her final version. She glanced sideways at me to see how I would react. My instincts told me that there was more behind her words than she wanted to imagine. Randy looked close to panic now. Given all the clues I'd noticed earlier that my brain was slowly processing, I could only think of one reason why she looked so twitchy, and I realized that the reason could be directly related to our cats. I just remembered that they not only like to climb the tree next to Goose's house, but they also like to jump from that tree to the roof of his veranda and walk around. Usually this was nothing special, because when they went on their excursions, most often he was not at home. On the other hand, there were a few occasions when I had to carefully edit the cat camera footage, because it showed right into his bedroom as they walked past it on the roof of the neighbor's porch. "Please tell me, honey, were you upstairs or downstairs at Gus's house?" I asked, looking into her instantly flushed face. The pendulum on the grandfather clock in the corner managed to click 3 times before she answered, holding her breath. It's not what you think. How do you know what I'm thinking about?" was the next logical question on my part. Randy nervously licked her suddenly dry lips, her eyes darting around the room. But there was no answer. Then I took the initiative. "I think I'll bring the cats back into the house. I'm guessing they'll be bringing a really interesting video here today." Randy's eyes widened, but again she said nothing, only swallowed and opened and closed her mouth several times. I went out onto the porch after making sure that the main part of my body remained in the doorway so that I would not be, purely by accident, locked from the outside. "Kitties! Om nom nom!" I called loudly into the space of the courtyard. When I started using this command, I said the words while loudly shaking a box of dry cat food. They quickly received the message and ran back home. Then, when they came in and allowed me to remove the cameras from their necks, I treated each of them to a well-deserved treat. After that, I gave them their usual portions of food. Over time, I stopped using the noisy stimulus just to get their attention, but still gave them a treat for following the command, and then fed them sometime later. So today, they reacted the same way they always did, and rushed to the door when they heard my call. I made sure to remove the cameras from their collars before they went inside so Randy wouldn't try to grab them. After handing out treats at the door, I let the cats inside. They shook themselves up, scattering lumps of snow stuck to their fur, froze for a couple of seconds, looking warily at Randy, who had frozen in the corridor, and then slipped further into the house. I closed the front door. Randy's gaze was drawn to both cat cameras that I held in my hand. Finally, she looked up and her gaze met mine. She looked somehow crestfallen, and a hunted expression froze on her face. "I go down to the basement to download the video and decide what I want to publish on the internet. I hope you can figure out something to do with yourself," I told her. I turned around and went down the stairs to my den. To hell with it, I'll feed the cats later. It took a while for the app on my phone to sync with the cameras, but after a quick 5-minute scroll through the footage, I found what I suspected. There was a video of Goose having sex with Randy on the bed in the bedroom on the 2nd floor of his house, which was clearly visible from the roof of the veranda, and in the video their faces were clearly visible, Randy's moaning mouth and her eyes closed in ecstasy. At some point, she opened them and realized that she was looking straight into Hermione's eyes, of course not knowing which cat of the two it was. Her eyes widened, she quickly jumped off the bed and rushed to the window in all her naked glory. Quick-witted Hermione was catapulted back onto the tree in an instant and quickly climbed down. When a half-dressed Randy rushed out of the house a few minutes later, trying to catch up with the black witness to her fall from grace, she instead chased peacefully those who moved out over a snowdrift by Hagrid, not even suspecting that he was chasing the wrong cat. The astonished Hagrid, who was not doing anything at all, took his legs in his paws just in case, accelerated and soared up the tree like a rocket. Hermione, hiding on the sidelines, saw how Randy, carried away in pursuit, rushed past and slipped into a secluded place under Goose's veranda, where he had a lot of different rubbish lying around. Randy never noticed her, stomping around under the tree in impotent irritation, her head raised, while Hagrid above meowed mockingly at her, wagging his tail. At the end of the video, an angry Randy was seen returning to our house after chasing 2 cats, but not catching either. And the second best part of each video was that they both clearly showed that Randy was in perfect physical condition before I went down to the basement. There were no marks or scratches on her at that moment. I purposely left both cameras on when I took them off the cats and held them in my hands in such a way as to capture Randy's face and body. The cats and I were not going to get any accusations of domestic violence from her in the divorce, since it seemed inevitable. After a while, I heard the patter of footsteps up the stairs and quickly climbed from the basement to the second floor, this time keeping my phone camera on. I was just in time to take another picture of Randy, showing that there were no marks on her face or visible parts of her body, when she pulled her hastily packed suitcase out of the bedroom, grabbed her coat, and walked out the front door without saying a word. As she left, she just gave me one last guilty look before the door slammed behind her. I followed her out, continuing to record, and filmed her in the car, slowly leaving, backing out of the driveway onto the snowy road. She was probably heading to her mother's house. However, it later turned out that I was fundamentally mistaken about how the divorce would work when I spoke about abuse. A couple of days after I caught Randy cheating, or more accurately, after my cats caught her, I returned home after taking care of some urgent matters, including a meeting with a divorce lawyer, and found a police car waiting outside my house. The sheriff's deputy gave me a copy of the court order that prohibited me from coming within 100 feet of my own home. As it turned out, Randy's personal lawyer ruefully told the judge that Randy feared for her life because I had threatened her. Fucking Goose was also with them, presenting his sworn affidavit in support of her allegations, claiming that he had heard my threats with his own ears. What does such a small perjury mean between such close friends? After some negotiation with the sheriff's deputy, I received a black trash bag filled with my clothes thrown out on the porch from Randy. When I tried to take my personal computer and cat cameras, she told the officer that I had already taken them with me. When I wanted to take Hagrid and Hermione out of the house, Randy said that they belonged to her, that she loved them madly, and that if I was going to claim them, she would fight me for her favorite cats, with the help of her lawyers. The deputy commented to me that our matter was now in the realm of an ordinary civil case for trial. I knew better than to argue with her or the cop, so I just took what I could carry with me and left. I have no idea what Randy thought she was getting at by taking my electronics, because incriminating her video was already on the cloud server. This was probably some kind of tactical move or a demonstration of one's own superiority with her sides. I was much more worried about my cats being left in her hands. I called my lawyer and asked him to check if the charges against me were valid. It turned out that no criminal action had been filed against me for allegedly abusing Randy, so I simply had to file a complaint in court to have the restraining order lifted and my belongings taken back. That's exactly what the deputy was saying, although the lawyer told me that by the time we got in front of the judge, the 2-week restraining order would have expired on its own. Also, my lawyer warned me that the entire divorce process would be negative and would take forever, especially if Randy tried to drag it out, but that he would soon begin preparing to file for divorce anyway. The lawyer also said he would make sure to somehow remove the cats from the home or at least have animal control check on their current condition, but he wasn't too optimistic that anyone would or will actually do so in the near future. In the meantime, I reached my mother's house and temporarily settled down with her, deciding to wait there for a while. I thought about posting the video of Randy and Goose on Instagram or YouTube, but my lawyer warned me that by doing so, it's enter into revenge porn territory, and that I would prefer not to have to deal with that level of escalation. It also distracted us from the divorce case, so I was thrown out of my own home on Friday. It snowed heavily that weekend and into the following week, keeping many government offices, including the courts, closed much of the time. At that time, the district court did not yet accept electronic filings, so my lawyer could not file a divorce complaint until the government offices were restored. This weather chaos also meant that for about 10 days, we were unable to file anything in court to challenge the restraining order. I called animal control to check on my cats, but based on the conversation, they weren't making a visit to my old home a priority, especially since the damn snowdrifts continued to disrupt traffic in the city. Apparently, I had to come to terms with the fact that Randy was probably going to do something bad to the cats if they weren't already starving to death. Just the thought that there was nothing I could do to somehow prevent this felony genocide made me furious. Things got off the ground the following Friday when the landline telephone in her kitchen began to ring at my mother's house. The call was from Randy. I blocked her number on my cell phone, and my mother's phone was an old model, which did not allow me to determine who was calling. My mother had just left the house during one of the breaks in the snowfall. "I just wanted you to know that Gus and I have been having sex in our bed all the time since you left." My wife's gloating voice came over the phone when she heard that I answered the call. I really wanted to record her call, but my cell phone had run out of battery, and besides, it was in another room upstairs anyway. I was about to hang up when I heard frantic meowing in the background. Somehow, Hermione and Hagrid were still alive. I was puzzled by how they managed this with a mistress of the house who hated them with every fiber of her being. "Oh, can you hear that?" "Well, yes, of course. You didn't even care about sex and me as much as you did about your cats. You always loved them more than me. Well, don't worry. I figured out how to solve this problem. I haven't fed these tailed devils since you were thrown out of the house at my request. A whole week without food. Ha ha, poor cats," she sang into the phone with mocking ridicule. "They are so desperate that they finally came out to talk to me instead of hiding who knows where." "That's great. I'm going to give them something to eat. I have a box of rat poison here, so I'll put some in my tuna cans. And then I'll say that, oh my God, it was all a terrible, terrible, and accidental mistake. But those nasty black creatures won't be lurking around and spying for you anymore when the job is done." Suddenly, the meowing seemed to become louder and more angry. There were clearly low, threatening notes in the cat's purring, and Randy suddenly had no interest in me. "Hey, stop it! Stand! Lie! Back off! No! Aye! Get off my leg! Damn animals! No! Oh! Oh!" Then, for some time in the tube, there was a cacophony of sharp hissing, cat squeals, the sounds of desperate female screams and screams, mixed with a catfight, the culmination of which was a strong fractional roar. After this, there was a ringing silence. I blew into the phone a couple of times. Nothing except some barely audible rustle. Finally, after about a minute or two, I heard a strangled, pained groan. Then Randy's trembling voice asked, "Are you still here?" "Yes, but I'm sorry that you didn't have a complete Karachan," I sincerely admitted. "Those things, they attacked me," Randy moaned, and her voice was filled with undisguised shock at such betrayal. All arrogance and bravado evaporated, as if they had never existed. "They saw a can of cat food in my hand and jumped at me from both sides, digging their claws into it. I think I threw them off, but they didn't calm down. God, what scary eyes they have. They attacked again, and oh, I tried to fight. And then I probably stopped and rolled down the steps to the basement. Ooh. Oh, what a shameful defeat," I commented sarcastically. "The national team of cats defeats Randy with a score of 2-0. You should call 911, she meowed. "Call yourself." I can't," she whimpered. Her voice sounded helpless. "Why not?" I think I broke my back. I can't move my arms or legs. And oh, damn. I can't even turn my head. I don't know where the phone is." Apparently, she was talking on speakerphone on a phone that was lying somewhere nearby. "You know, I would love to, but I'm a little busy right now. I'm doing some laundry, and then I'll need to fold my things neatly. Otherwise, everything will change, and I like order, you know. Please." There was despair in her voice. "Maybe Gus can help you?" "He always seemed to be there when you needed him," I suggested. She began to sob, and then suddenly squealed. Lord God, the cats came closer and sniffed my face. Now she was in real panic. "Are you bleeding there?" Yes, I think so." Uh-oh. The smell of blood will awaken some primal instincts, especially since you starved them for a week. I once saw something similar in Game of Thrones. only it was with dogs. Cats seem to start with the nose, don't they? I thought out loud, pressing the telephone receiver to my ear with my shoulder. Then, they also seem to like ears, for a snack. I think, Randy, that your worst fears may yet come true. Oh my God, please help me. Help! Listen, Randy, you're obviously too busy right now. Maybe we can talk sometime later. After that, I hung up. Are you trying to poison my cats? Think again. Are you lying about me threatening you? Get out. Period. Moreover, you go to the left, not caring about marriage vows? After all this, I had absolutely no love left in me and no desire to help Randy. Now she was Mr. Goose's problem. At least I no longer had to worry about the cats starving to death, or how many zeros a divorce will cost me. I was pleasantly surprised at how well I slept that night. Shortly before this, I had spoken to Dr. Marivers, whom I met online, about whether therapy would be a good idea, but he had this creepy accent that I had difficulty understanding. In fact, I wasn't even sure he had a license. In any case, talking to a real psychotherapist about such things could very well lead to me being locked up in an asylum. So this topic was definitely not discussed. However, posting things online seems to really help. I like to troll various assholes online. It's easy once you find their vulnerabilities and pain points. This allows me to release a lot of anger and negative tension. A couple of days later, I received a call from one of the animal control officers. It turned out that he was a longtime fan of my cats and the content I posted with them on my Instagram account. He realized he hadn't seen any posts for a while and put 2 plus 2 together. I explained to him that Randy and I were going through a pretty messy divorce and that she was starving my cats. For some reason, he did not know all the details in advance, but said that my information clarified the situation. This employee explained that later that fateful day, he stopped by my house to check on how the cats were doing. He could see them in the living room window, sitting in a column and constantly looking at him. In the basement window as he passed by, looking around the house in an attempt to find my wife so he could talk to her, he saw the legs of a man who did not seem to move. Then he called the police and paramedics, who arrived a short time later and broke down the front door. The animal control officer sadly informed me that it appeared that Randy was already dead by that time. He also suggested that I probably wouldn't want to have an open casket funeral for my ex-wife. Yes, the cats did a thorough job on it. No wonder, because they were very hungry and angry. Because of this, the identity of the deceased has not yet been reliably established. The fact is that they simply had nothing to work with the exception of teeth, and this kind of confirmation would take some time. After he told this chilling story, the bottom line was that animal control would most likely have to euthanize Hagrid and Hermione. True, to do this, they will have to find and catch these beasts. Because the minute the front door was broken open, both cats flew out of my house like 2 hypersonic missiles and flew up the tree onto the neighbor's roof. I thought that maybe I could intercept Hagrid or Hermione before anyone noticed, given that all the responding services were fussing over my now-deceased wife. Keep in mind that I haven't yet decided whether I even want to continue living with these black predators now that they've rocketed to the top of the food chain, but I figured I'd think about it tomorrow. So, I headed to my former home. Wanting to make this visit as discreet as possible, I left my phone at my mother's. There was no need for anyone to track my movements. My plan was to park on the far side of some tree-lined lot at the end of our street, then take a shortcut on foot and sneak into Goose's backyard, where I hoped I could get the cats off the roof. Alas, everything did not turn out quite as I expected. When I drove closer to our block, it was already well after noon, and the sun was setting. More snow has fallen in the area recently, keeping most people inside their homes. Looking out from behind a group of trees from my position, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see my cats on the roof of our neighbor's house at all. However, I had a good look at the fact that there were still many police and fire trucks parked in front of my house. This was probably the most interesting death all month. Everyone who visits there will probably talk about it for years, astonishing newcomers with this incredible story. I didn't see the point in trying to get close to my house, given the whole bunch of people trampled around him. So I gave up trying to find the escaped animals and walked back through the forest to the canal, walking a long way to get back to the car I left there. After heavy rainfall this week, snow was everywhere. Finally, I came to a place with a view of the canal aqueduct. It was built to carry the waters of the canal over a wide stream that flowed into the river nearby. Even in dry weather, it was always risky to ride a bicycle along the aqueduct because the path along it and next to the canal was very narrow. Instead, you had to walk along it, carrying your bike, as most locals did. Now, with fresh, plentiful snow cover and perhaps hiding with ice underneath, the situation has likely become even more dangerous. Coming out from behind the trees and looking at the canal, I suddenly saw that my cats were on the aqueduct. They sat side by side on the edge and looked down at the water flowing in the stream. I also realized that from the other side of the aqueduct, Goose was approaching on his bicycle. This bike fanatic was happily riding along the snow-covered footpath, about to cross the aqueduct and heading in my direction. However, to do this, he would have to drive past the cats, who were partially hidden from him by the railing and the fading light of the setting sun. At the last second, the cats noticed Goose, and Goose saw cats. They all reacted at the same time. The cats jumped out right in front of the bicycle, and Goose, who had gained momentum, reflexively jerked the steering wheel to the side and then slid along the ice. He crashed into the railing with acceleration, tumbled over the fence with his ass up, and flew down into the waters of the stream with a scream. His magnificent bicycle, rearing up, followed its owner, catching up and falling on his stupid head, just at the moment when he emerged and opened his mouth for air. Telephone Velo Goose, who I'm sure was recording the statistics of his races, also flew into the water in a graceful parabola and bubbled like a small fountain, like a silverfish. It sank to the bottom. As I ran up to the aqueduct, I saw the would-be Tour de France winner trying to rise from the bottom of the stream. The winter sun had almost set below the horizon, and it was already quite dark down there. The stream itself was not very deep, but the water in it turned out to be very cold, and Goose was obviously soaked in it from head to toe, and in addition, he apparently had a badly damaged leg on which he could not lean. His other problem was that the banks of the creek were very steep and icy, so there was really no way of getting out of sight, especially with his injured leg. He raised his head, saw me, and called for help. I couldn't make out what exactly he was screaming because the snow cover muffled his scream. In response, I shouted, "Try again! Maybe you can call Randy for help!" That's when he recognized me. He tried to climb onto the bank of the stream, but he failed and rolled back down. One thought occurred to me, and I decided that now I need to be somewhere else as soon as possible. I turned to head back to my car and saw both cats sitting on the path, staring at me without blinking. Their black mustachioed faces showed recognition, but all three of us somehow suddenly realized that from now on, we were going to go our own ways. After sitting for another minute, they stretched, snorting and bending gracefully, meowing something in their own, cat-like form, as a farewell, and they rushed towards the forest, where they soon disappeared from sight. I assumed that when they got tired of playing and exploring, they would return and hide in their hiding place under Goose's house. A few days later, when I returned to my house again, and after carefully removing other people's traces from the master bedroom and basement, and at the same time throwing away the bed, replacing it with a new one, I heard from a neighbor that some tourist had found a body, our former neighbor, on the bank of the creek. His limbs were frostbitten, and he died of hypothermia. They say that hypothermia kills quickly and painlessly, as if you were quietly and peacefully falling into sleep. Thinking about all this later, I could not understand why people always say that meeting a black cat is not good. Personally, I have always had good luck with them so far, although I think my next pet will be a rabbit, or better yet, a goldfish. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one. Third story. My wife and I made love. I had already brought her to the finish line twice, and now the two of us were approaching the finish line. And here's the release. For a moment we just lay there, overcome with bliss, when her eyes opened. I kissed her softly on the lips and rolled over, placing her head on my shoulder. As we slowly came to our senses, I thought about the chain of events that had led us to this moment. My wife Kelly and I were with our friends Chuck and Beverly Conrad for our monthly Last Friday of the Month event. We had a nice dinner at Legal Seafoods and moved the party to Phoenix Landing for an evening of drinking and dancing. We finished our first round of drinks and did a few dances, exchanging partners a couple of times, before returning to our table to order another round of drinks. A wave of excitement ran through the club. We were puzzled at first, but then we noticed that James Wilson, the new Patriots quarterback, had just walked in. He and his entourage took a table at the other end of the club, and just as things began to calm down, new excitement began. Brianna Brown, a local host, had just walked in, but she was more than just a host. She was a former Miss Massachusetts and Miss America finalist, obviously gorgeous, and there were rumors that she was being considered for an even bigger market. Her band sat on our side of the club, but closer to the DJ booth. Beverly stared at Wilson with her goo-goo eyes. "Damn, he can put those boots under my bed anytime he wants," she said breathlessly. "Mine too," Kelly said. Chuck looked angry, and I tried to defuse the situation. "Do I need to remind you, lady, that you are married?" I said. "Come on, Matt, relax," Beverly said. "Besides, it's unlikely to ever happen," Kelly added. "Even if so, it will only be one night, the chance of a lifetime. What's bad about it? Now it's my turn to steam." "The bad thing is that it would be the end of the marriage," Chuck said. "How would you feel if Brianna was with one of us?" "Yeah, as if that would ever happen," Kelly grinned. "Why is this less likely than you and Wilson?" "Chuck and I aren't exactly dogs." Both she and Beverly laughed. "Seriously, Matt, Beverly and I have been asked to dance at least half a dozen times already. How many women have asked you to dance? I'll tell you, 0. That's only because women don't usually ask men to dance, especially if the men are with their wives." "It doesn't matter," they said at the same time, rolling their eyes. Now, Kelly and Beverly are pretty hot, and not just housewives hot, but Chuck and I aren't exactly chopped liver. We train regularly, we move well, and we can dance without stepping on anyone's feet. The conversation was almost back to normal when Beverly began practically jumping up and down in her seat, clapping her hands as if she was trying to bring Tinkerbell back to life. "He's coming here!" she exclaimed. "Who?" I began to ask, then looked over my shoulder, and sure enough, Wilson was heading in our direction, stopping at each table to sign autographs or pose for selfies. Finally, he got to our table. "Excuse me," he said. "Would you mind if I asked your charming wife to dance?" Although I was pleased that he was kind enough to ask me first, I was tempted to say no until I saw Kelly's head bouncing up and down like a yo-yo. I nodded, and when he turned around, he didn't even have to ask because Kelly was already standing up taking his hand, and they headed out to the dance floor. I have to admit that they were a lovely couple, but when the music changed to a slow song and she melted into his arms, I felt anger rise within me. Just as I was about to get up, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder and a melodic voice said, "Can I invite you?" I turned around and probably looked like a complete moron, looking into the bluest eyes I had ever seen, and they belonged to Brianna Brown. I felt like I was in a trance as I stood up and followed her onto the dance floor. The slow song was still playing as she wrapped her arms around my neck and pressed her perfect breasts against my chest. I carefully placed my hands on her waist, but she moved them to her back, dangerously close to her perfect ass. "Sorry, I don't want to seem ungrateful, but why me? There must be a dozen guys here closer to your league than me." Her laughter was delightful, and her eyes sparkled with a special sparkle. "I saw what happened to your wife and Wilson," she said, and must have noticed my frown. "I understand your feelings. I've seen this before, and I'm afraid it rarely ends well." "What do you mean? I don't understand." "Almost every night the woman leaves with him, leaving her husband alone and humiliated. In rare cases, the wife returns to her husband. I hope I can encourage your wife to make the right decision." But why? Who are we to you? She had a thoughtful look and turned away, but not before I saw a single tear in her eyes. It's a long story. Maybe I'll tell you, depending on how the rest of the evening goes. By the way, my name is Brianna. I know. I recognized you. I'm Matt Smythe. She looked at me with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Smythe. I know this sounds pretentious as hell. Why not just Smith, right? Well, my parents are originally from England and wanted to maintain a small connection with their native land. At that moment, the song ended, and I walked her to the table, thanked her for the dance, and returned to our table. Kelly was already there, her eyes throwing daggers at me. So, the prodigal son returns. Did you enjoy dancing with this beauty? I'm sorry? Why is my dance with Brianna worse than yours with Wilson? Oh, it's Brianna, isn't it? Already by name? I assume you called him Mr. Wilson? She had the politeness to blush. As you say, she said when I sat down. We started chatting with Chuck and Beverly again, but the tension could be cut with a knife. About an hour later, Kelly had to go to the bathroom. Surprisingly, Beverly did not go with her, but said that she needed to take something from the wardrobe and headed towards the exit of the club. Beverly returned a few minutes later, but Kelly was nowhere to be seen. When I got up to go check on her, Beverly looked worried but didn't say anything. My path to the restroom took me to Brianna's table, and she stood up, stopping me with her hand on my chest. Please, Brianna, I need to check on Kelly. Matt, I don't think she's here. Wilson went to the bathroom around the same time, and neither of them returned. Come with me. I'll check the ladies' room and you can check the men's, but I don't think we'll find them there. She was right. I had a vague suspicion, and we returned to my table. Chuck's eyes bulged at the sight of Brianna, but Beverly looked even more worried than before. Beverly, I said, Kelly seems to have left the building. Do you happen to know anything about this? Chuck struggled to tear his eyes away from Brianna and look at Beverly. Beverly, he said, what did you do? I bought the coat and gave it to Kelly at the front door. How do you know she needs it? Why did she need this? I understood this from the way she looked at me. She needed him to leave with Wilson. If I hadn't already been standing, I would have jumped out of the chair. You thought this was a good idea? Why? I asked. This may be the only time she will be with a real celebrity. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime. Being with a real celebrity. You want to fuck a real celebrity, don't you? Come on, Matt, it's not that big of a deal. I guess you're not going with Brianna, she said, laughing. I wouldn't be so sure, Brianna said. I completely forgot she was here. Come on, Matt, let's get out of here. And she grabbed my hand as we headed towards the exit. We grabbed our coats, and as I helped her put it on, I said, Thanks for the ego boost. I think I'll go home to my empty house to prepare for the end of my marriage. Why do you think that this was just an impetus for narcissism? Let's take your car. Why should Kelly be the only one who gets this once in a lifetime? I looked at her, expecting to hear, gotcha. But instead, I saw a warm, bright smile. What the hell? I thought. I didn't have any better offers at the moment, so with our arms around each other's waists, we walked to the garage and got into my car. Where to, my lady? I asked, and she directed me to an elite residential building. The garage attendant was about to shoo me away when he saw Brianna and motioned for me to enter. Brianna showed me where to park, and we took the elevator up to her apartment. I was shocked by her luxurious apartment. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Brianna simply tossed her coat onto a nearby chair, and I followed suit. Would you like something to drink? Brianna asked me. I'll have the same as you, I said, and she poured 2 glasses of white wine. She sat down on the edge of the couch and patted the seat next to her. As I sat down, she pressed the remote and soft music began to play from hidden speakers. As we sat in companionable silence, sipping wine, I wondered what her end game was. Does she really think that we will sleep together? If that were the case, could I? I had no illusions about what Kelly was probably going to do if she hadn't already, but I believed in my marriage vows. The only problem was that Kelly didn't seem to share my views on marriage vows. Could I break them? As Beverly said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Could I afford to give this up? It looked like Brianna was going to try to take the decision out of my hands as she pressed herself against my shoulder and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. I was just sitting there taking in the situation, not to mention Brianna's intoxicating scent, when she apparently became impatient with my indecisiveness. She stood up, pulled me to my feet, and we started dancing. Shyness was not the order of the day as she placed my hands directly on her ass. I began to realize that, in the words of the Borg, resistance is futile, and that I could enjoy and deal with the consequences later. This time, I didn't wait for her to make a move. I threw my head back, and when she turned to protest, I took her face in my hands and kissed her lips. I have no idea how long we stood there kissing, but when we broke apart, we were out of breath. Her face was red, and I'm sure mine was too. She led me to her bedroom. I heard soft music as she sat me down on her bed. She began to unbutton her blouse, and I, as if in a trance, unbuttoned my shirt. I was just taking off my shirt when she took off her blouse, revealing her free breasts. I don't get hung up on bra sizes, but her breasts looked perfect on her figure. She slowly continued to undress, seducing and turning me on more and more. Then she helped me take off my clothes and started pleasuring my manhood, which I just pulled out of my trousers. I knew I wouldn't last long, and sure enough, it only took a moment before I felt the pressure building. "Brianna, I think I'll come," I said, but she just smiled at me. And that was 1 second when Haz reached finish line. I grabbed her head and kissed her deeply. She returned my kisses. "Okay," she said, "my turn," and sat down on the edge of the bed. I don't want to brag, and maybe I shouldn't, since I had good teachers, but I'm good at please women. I pulled out all my tricks and gave her everything I could, and soon she was writhing in sweet agony. We were basking in the glow of some amazing sex. Was it better than Kelly? To use a cliché, it was different. "Brianna, you said you would tell me why you wanted to help me, to help us." She turned away, and I saw tears in her eyes again. "About 5 years ago, I worked at a small television studio and was just starting to make a name for myself. At the time, I was married to a guy similar to you. He was my biggest cheerleader, always willing to up the ante when a new opportunity required us to move. We were at a charity event when the head of the studio asked me to dance. He didn't even ask my husband, but I took his hand and left my husband sitting. I barely noticed my husband's anger and pushed it into the background as Chuck carried me away. His name was Charles, but he thought Chuck made him seem more like a man of the people, when in fact he thought nothing of those he considered beneath him. I can't say that he used any great seduction techniques on me, although he did make a few subtle, well, not so subtle hints that he could help my career. To my eternal shame, I left the club with him without even looking back at my husband. I was told that he put on a brave face, but was crushed. I wish I could say the sex was out of this world, or at least my career really took off, but in both cases the opposite was true. The sex was uninspiring at best. He seemed to think that just being with him must be a big thrill. Meanwhile, rumors about our affair caused problems. He was a big enough fish that the dirt wouldn't stick, but they let me go with enough severance pay to keep me from suing. My career took a step back, but I've obviously recovered, although my heart breaks when I think about my ex. I heard that he got married again and has children, which we always talked about. At that moment, she couldn't stand it, and I hugged her. My own eyes grew misty, thinking about how Kelly and I talked about our son and future children, wondering if we'd ever have them now. I noticed that Brianna had fallen asleep, so I pulled the blanket over us and hugged her as she unconsciously snuggled against me. I woke up to find myself lying in bed alone with the delicious smell of bacon coming from the kitchen. I used the bathroom, walked into the kitchen, and was greeted by the sight of Brianna in a long t-shirt, her buttocks peeking out teasingly from time to time. She smiled at me over her shoulder. "The coffee should be ready," she said, nodding towards the coffee pot in the corner. I poured myself a cup of the nectar of the gods and sipped it until she placed a plate of bacon and eggs in front of me. We ate in silence until I addressed the elephant in the room. So where do we go from here? For a few moments she was lost in her thoughts. First, she said, breaking the silence, you and Kelly must decide where you will go. Can any of you survive what happened last night? What about us? She laughed, not without malice. Matt, there is no us, at least not now. We had a wonderful night, but we barely know each other, and until you or Kelly decide otherwise, you're married. If you can't figure it out, maybe we could see each other, see if there's more to it than sexual attraction. I must warn you in advance that my career comes first, right now. If I get a better opportunity, I might have to move. Could you move out or settle for a long-distance relationship? In addition, in my position, people often pester me, and there may be gossip. I promise you right now that, if we become a couple, all that will happen will be gossip, but you have to be ready to deal with it. Now go home to your wife and see if there is anything left of your marriage that can be saved. Here is my business card. Let me know how it goes. With these words, she hugged me, kissed me warmly on the lips, and sent me on my way. I arrived home just as Wilson was dropping Kelly off. He gave me a small smirk as he pulled out of the driveway. Kelly and I walked up to the door at the same time. I opened the door, and she rushed past me, the smell of fresh shampoo and soap emanating from her. I followed her and closed the door behind me. "Where have you been?" she asked defiantly. Is she asking me about this? I thought, after what she did? I was with Brianna. She almost burst out laughing. Yeah, as if. You were probably holed up in a cheap motel somewhere and licking your wounds. She really drove me crazy. No, you can ask Chuck and Beverly. They saw her ask me to dance, and then we left together. She probably just took pity on you, put on a show so that you wouldn't look like such a loser. She probably left you as soon as you left the club. Things weren't going at all the way I had hoped. I thought we could at least try to move past what had happened, but the complete lack of respect for me made that less and less likely. I decided that one more conversation might take us to the point of no return, so I walked over to our closet, grabbed a large suitcase, and started throwing clothes into it. She just stood there with her arms crossed over her chest, a wry smile on her face, obviously thinking I was bluffing. Her look changed as I walked past and headed for the front door. Come on, you're not going to leave just because I had a little fling? No, I'm leaving because of your disrespect for me. FYI, I did spend the night with Brianna, and it was amazing. I returned home in the hope that we could cope with our mutual indiscretions. But I see that this is now impossible. Don't call me. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. I walked out of the house, not bothering to close the door, and saw her standing there, watching me as I got into the car. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry, so I turned the corner, slowed down, and let my tears flow. I paid for a week at an extended stay motel, and before I could plop down on my bed, the phone rang. I was going to ignore him, thinking it was Kelly, but when I saw it was Chuck, I replied, "Hi, Chuck." "Hello, Matt. What the hell happened?" Kelly just called Beverly, and damn was she pissed. She was furious? I almost screamed into the phone. She left me for some joke, and when I told her I spent the night with Brianna, she laughed. "Hey, Matt, Wilson isn't just some jock, and you have to admit that you and Brianna are a little hard to believe." "And you too," I said. "Damn, you saw us together, you saw us leaving together. Does no one respect me? Of course we respect you, Matt, but you and Brianna? Come on, be serious." "Oh, but Kelly and Wilson are quite believable. Look, I don't know what's going to happen to me and Kelly, but I think I need to find new friends. Goodbye." "Wait, Matt. But I'm already disconnected. Kelly and I went back and forth for a while. She even apologized for the Wilson stunt. But the real sticking point was her lack of respect for me. Even a call from Brianna confirming our night together didn't help." "Nice try, Matt," she said. "I think you're her charity project this month." I spent another week at the motel. Brianna and I dated a couple of times, and the hosts even teased Brianna about her new mystery man. But she just brushed it off. One good thing about being alone was that it gave me time to work on my writing. I posted stories on internet sites from time to time, much to Kelly's displeasure, which I believe was another sign of her disrespect. Brianna, on the other hand, when I complained that Kelly put my texts aside and never read them, insisted on looking. I resisted, fearing further embarrassment. I shouldn't have worried. Brianna was impressed and even made some suggestions. I think that was the turning point, and I filed for divorce. Kelly was stunned. "You're not seriously going to divorce me because of my stupid affair with Wilson, are you?" "Actually, no, but the fact that you consider my humiliation a stupid trifle partly explains why I'm divorcing you. You don't respect me. I wonder if you ever did. You don't believe that Brianna is interested in me and my stories, which you laugh at without even reading them, Brianna thinks are pretty good," I said and walked out the door. Kelly was struggling with her divorce, although I don't know why. Maybe she just didn't like the idea of losing. Our friends tried to help, but I think they made the situation worse by laughing at the idea of me and Brianna, telling me that I would never find anyone as hot as Kelly. Of course, the court ordered a consultation. I went through the charade. I didn't do anything stupid like play on my phone during the sessions, but whenever it was brought up, I made it clear that I was simply no longer interested in marrying Kelly. The counselor eventually relented and recommended that the court move forward with the divorce process, and Kelly tearfully agreed. It was hard being a dad every weekend, but my son and I tried our best. It helped that the divorce, once Kelly realized it was over, wasn't particularly acrimonious, and we were able to live together peacefully. Brianna was at the final court hearing, and as we walked out holding hands, the look on Kelly's face was priceless. We maintained friendly relations for most of the year. Although we were exceptional, we made no promises of eternity. With Brianna's busy schedule and no marital obligations, I was able to devote more time to my writing, and Brianna continued to provide valuable advice. When my last story was finished, she suggested that I send it to a publisher, but I was afraid of being rejected. Brianna finally got an offer from a Chicago studio, which was a big step forward, and we had one last night. We skipped dinner to spend as much time together as possible. Although we made love, it wasn't some wild freedom. We probably spent more time cuddling, talking about our feelings, our hopes, and dreams for the future. Once she was asleep, I got up and made a few more changes to my story before crawling back into bed and cuddling with her, enjoying the feeling of her cuddling even tighter to me. When I woke up, she was already out of bed, so I went to the bathroom and took a quick shower. As I walked past the laptop table, I was puzzled to see it open. I was sure I closed it last night. I shrugged and headed into the kitchen where Brianna was preparing breakfast. I came up from behind, hugged her, and buried my nose in her neck. She turned her head and kissed me. "Breakfast is almost ready. How about coffee?" "Your wish is my law." And with a wide bow, I poured coffee and put the cups on the table. I'm afraid most of the cooking was wasted as we just pushed the food onto our plates and looked at each other. Finally, it was time to clean up so I could leave, and Brianna could prepare to leave. We had already packed most of her things into the car, and the moving service came to pick up the rest. I grabbed my laptop, hugged and kissed Brianna one last time, and we parted ways with hopeful promises to stay in touch. I gave myself a couple of weeks to grieve the end of our relationship and then began to cautiously enter the dating scene. I deliberately avoided places where I might expect to see Kelly or our old gang, although I saw them from time to time, but we never got close to each other. One day I was looking through the mail and saw an envelope from Battles Publishing. I was puzzled and put it aside while I looked through the rest of my mail. I took the envelope to the kitchen, sat down with a cup of coffee, and opened it. "Dear Mr. Smythe, we have received your manuscript and are seriously considering the possibility of publishing it. Please contact me as soon as possible to arrange an appointment. Sincerely yours, Melanie Wilson, Associate Editor." What the fuck? I've never served anything to anyone. Then I remembered. The laptop that I had left closed, but found open in the morning. "Brianna." She copied the file and showed it to someone. I didn't know if I wanted to kick her or kiss her. On the one hand, she acted behind my back. On the other, the publisher became interested in my story. I decided to get even without telling her anything. I didn't know what connection she might have, but I hoped I could prevent anyone from telling her before I was ready. I contacted Ms. Wilson to make an appointment. It didn't take long to come to an agreement, but before I could get too excited, I had to wait for the editor to do his job. I was excited to see that the text seemed more red than black. I swallowed my pride and started working hard on all of her edits. I had to admit that she was right most of the time, and she listened to my objections seriously. She was right more often than not. After 3 passes, we were ready to print. I didn't tell Brianna, although we've spoken several times since I received the letter. I was doing a book signing in Chicago and called Brianna to set up a visit. Opening the door, she hugged me tightly and kissed me. "Oh, Matt, I'm so glad to see you again. What brought you to Chicago, business or pleasure?" "I hope it's both," I winked. "I could help with that last one," she said with an exaggerated wink. Walking out of her house, she was amazed by the limousine. "Wow, things must be looking up," she said. "You could say that," I said. "This is your city. Why don't you choose a restaurant?" She told the driver, and we drove off. Although we did not have a reservation, they recognized it immediately, and soon we were seated. "So, Matt, what business brought you to Chicago?" "It's a surprise," I said, and she pouted. We ate deliciously, but decided to skip dessert. "Let's go to my place?" she asked with a flirtatious smile. "I have some things to do first. Why don't you come with me? I don't think you'll be bored." She was disappointed and puzzled, but nodded approvingly. The limo pulled up to my hotel, and the driver helped Brianna out, and I followed. I led her into the lobby and up the escalator to the second floor where the book signing ceremony was to take place. I couldn't stop her from seeing the sign with my photo on it, and she ran into my arms. "Matt, you did it, you did it. I knew you could handle it." "Well, I got a little help," I said with a grin. I don't know what you're talking about, Matt." "Don't be modest, Brianna. I never submitted my story and no one else had access to my laptop. You will not make a good thief. You left your laptop open. I closed it that night." She blushed. "I'm not angry, Brianna. I would never have the courage to send out my story. You believed in me more than I did myself. I can never thank you enough." "No need to thank me, Matt. I'm just happy to see you succeed." At that moment, a representative from the publishing house approached me and said it was time to sign the contract, so I quickly kissed Brianna and followed the representative to the table set for me. I watched as Brianna leaned against the wall, smiling, as a long line formed for people to sign their books. Her smile faded a little as some women posed for selfies and kissed me on the cheek. I just smiled, shrugged, and felt relieved when she smiled back. Finally, the signing ended, and I joined Brianna in giving her a big kiss to make up for all the kisses I had received. "How about we come back to my place so I can welcome you to Chicago?" As tempting as it may sound, my room is upstairs. Besides, I already let the limo driver go. "Not too confident, huh?" she said with a wide smile, and we went up to my room. We spent the night getting reacquainted with our bodies, then slept before ordering breakfast to our room. "Matt, where do we go now? Can you stay a while?" "Sorry, but I cannot. I have a few more stops on the tour, and then I have to get back to my day job." "I understand, Matt, but let's stay in touch. I really enjoy spending time together." That's what we did. We talked, we texted, we emailed, we made phone calls, whatever worked at the time. My publisher showed interest in the second book, and I spent every free minute on it. As soon as I sent it to the editor, I called Brianna. "Hey, Matt, it's nice to hear your voice again." "Me too, Brianna. I have great news. I wrote another book." "This is great news. When can I read the next great American novel?" "This will take some time. I just presented the first draft, but that's not all." "About? And what?" "If the book goes well, they will give me a contract for 3 more books. I will be able to quit my job and write full-time." "That's great, Matt. I knew you had it in you." Yes, it is. I owe it all to you. Without support, I would still be writing just for my own pleasure. Don't say that, Matt. You have real talent. Sooner or later, it would have manifested itself. Maybe so, but there are thousands of talented people who simply don't get that kind of breakthrough. If you hadn't sent my story, who knows if I would have had the courage to present it myself. We argued, but she knew I was right. I don't know if it was my experience with the first book, or if I just had more confidence, but the editing process went very smoothly, and the book was soon ready to go to press. I spent most of my vacation on my first book tour, so I had to take unpaid leave and planned my stop in Chicago for the whole weekend. I skipped looking for a hotel and spent the weekend with Brianna. I couldn't get enough of Brianna's amazing body and couldn't figure out why she was so attracted to me, and eventually I had to open my big mouth. God, Matt, I love you, but you men can be so ignorant sometimes. She suddenly fell silent. Neither of us had ever said the L word before. Seriously, Matt, she continued, I can be as caught up as the next person in superficial attraction, but lasting love means seeing beneath the surface. Sure, you're attractive, but what's special about you is what's on the inside. Even after what Kelly did to you, I had to practically seduce you into my bed. What could I say? She was right, and I had no idea. Sorry, Brianna. I don't know what my problem was. Maybe I just don't value myself. Maybe Kelly has punched a hole in my self-confidence, but I shouldn't have projected that onto you. It's okay, Matt. I understand. You just continue to be a kind, caring person, and you will never have to doubt my love for you. She just told me she loved me again, and I didn't tell her I loved her, although being the shrewd woman I am, I think she knew. And yet, I could not leave this thought in the air. I love you too, Brianna. I know, silly, she said, and gave me a soul-searing kiss. The rest of the tour went well, as did book sales. When I got home, I invited Brianna to stay. We visited a few old places, and people who knew us before seemed amazed that we were still together. Others recognized Brianna from her occasional reporting on the show. I even got some recognition from my books. From time to time, we would cross paths with someone from the old company, but I was not interested in rubbing their nose in my success, both personal and professional. For their part, they seemed too embarrassed to approach us, although Kelly seemed more angry than embarrassed. Well, life is too short to waste it on fools. The first 2 nights our love was wild and full of passion, but I had other plans for our last night. I took her to the most romantic restaurant in the city, where our conversation was full of endearments, but nothing special. No, I didn't stage a big proposal at the restaurant. I knew that serious discussions would follow and wanted to find a more private place. Where are we going to dance today, Matt? Actually, I was thinking maybe we could go straight home tonight, if that's okay. Of course, Matt, she said, clearly not understanding what I was thinking. When we got to my house, I hung up our coats and asked her to sit while I got the wine. Sitting down, I handed her a glass and proposed a toast. For love and friendship, I said. For love and friendship, she repeated, and we clinked glasses. I sipped the wine, quietly watching Brianna. After finishing the wine, she jumped up, almost swallowing the ring I put in her glass. Thurs, she muttered. Is this what I think? I turned to her and took her hands in mine. Yes, Brianna, it is. I cannot describe how my life has changed since you came into it. I can only imagine what it might be like if you were a part of this forever. Please say that you will be my wife. Oh, Matt, if you only knew how much I want to say yes. But I already told you that my career comes first, and if a better offer comes, I'll probably take it. I can't ask you to raise your rates every time I change jobs. You won't have to. What do you mean? My last book was successful. Successful enough that a publisher gave me a 3-book deal with a big enough advance that I could quit my job and write full-time. And I did. Did what? I was discharged from my job. As soon as my lease is up, I'll be moving to Chicago. If you allow me, I would like us to be together. She just sat there with her eyes wide open and her mouth open, and then she threw herself into my arms. Yes, yes, I will marry you. We had a small wedding. My parents flew in with my son Danny, and Brianna's parents were there with her sister. We spent Saturday with my family, seeing as many places as we could pack in one day, and Brianna used her weather girl magic to give us a sunny day to get married by the lake. After saying goodbye, full of happy tears, we went on our honeymoon to Barbados. It would be nice to say that we lived happily ever after, and in general we did, but two powerful careers coupled with groupies. And yes, I had my share, although I didn't understand why, can cause some petty jealousy, but we made a promise to always talk about everything, and we smoothed out the bumps in the road. Luckily, there was only one step in Brianna's career, moving to New York City for the Today Show. It didn't really matter, though, since I could write anywhere. We had been living in New York for about a year when Brianna surprised me with a pregnancy test. I didn't even know she was off birth control, but I was ecstatic and couldn't wait to be a full-time dad again. I love Danny to death, and it's so hard to say goodbye when my weekend is over. It was a little surreal having the whole country following our pregnancy, but we got used to it. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Brittany, and luckily, she seems to have inherited her mother's looks. Of course, the program had to have photos as soon as possible after birth and videos soon after. I had just finished a book tour for my 5th book, and the publisher wanted me to sign a new contract, but I didn't feel like I had another topic, but I promised them first place if I wrote more. Meanwhile, royalties from the books, coupled with some movie deals, kept the cash flowing, and of course, Brianna was making a lot of money, so I settled happily into my new role as Mr. Mom. If you ever asked me if I was happy that my wife cheated on me, I would ask you if you were crazy, but here and now, I am happier than I ever could have imagined. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.